Trivia question. What is the world's second most popular form of motorsport? Want to find the answer? Keep watching. But with that being said, family, come on inside. Welcome to the newest episode of the Scrutineering Room, and welcome to another Two Wheel Tuesday. Thank you guys so much for watching, and boy, we got a lot to cover tonight. But to answer your trivia question, we're going to preview the second most popular form of motorsport across the world. And ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce to some and present to others MotoGP. MotoGP is the second most popular form of motorsport in the world. It is essentially Formula One on two wheels. Half the wheels, but twice the fun, especially the reputation Formula One's been getting lately. But this is a global championship. It's been going on since the 1950s, similar to Formula One. And honestly, these are some true daredevils putting on some of the most spectacular shows in every corner of the world. If you have a chance, if you come across this and you're like, what is MotoGP? Do yourself a favor this year and check them out this season. NBC Sports has the coverage this year. Mostly the races will be on CNBC. You'll see a couple of races on NBC proper. But if you do have those cable packages, give CNBC a watch. You will have to make sure you pay attention for TV times. Unfortunately, just stuck like this, guys. You also can do MotoGP Video Pass if everything so entices you. But tonight, I want to just break down and give you a little preview of the MotoGP season. Give you a little brief rundown of the schedule. We'll talk about the manufacturers that built the bikes, and we'll talk about the teams and a few of the riders I think that may play a part in this MotoGP season. So with that being said, let's go straight into it. Let's talk the MotoGP schedule. 21 races across 5 continents this season will be taking part on our global tour. The series kicks off, if you're watching this, I am putting this on Tuesday the 5th. So that means this upcoming weekend, March 10th, the season opens in Qatar. Yes, the same Lusail Doha Qatar that kicked off the World Endurance Championship. The track is flipped. They will host MotoGP this Sunday. I'm not going to go over the full schedule, which you now see on your screen, but I will give you some highlights. MotoGP's sole trip to the US of A will take place on April 14th at Circuit of the Americas. It's the Red Bull Grand Prix of the Americas. Love how all that just flows, right? The first of 4, that's right, if you think Formula One has a crazy addiction with the US, MotoGP has a crazy addiction with Spain, but that also is self-explanatory because just like how Liberty Media is the US-owned company that runs F1, Dorna is the Spanish-based promoter that runs MotoGP. So no surprise that Spain has 4 races on this year's MotoGP calendar. Their first of 4 races is at Jerez on April 28th. They race in Barcelona May 26th. They won't return to Spain until they go to the Aragon region on September 1st, and then finally the season ends in Spain in Valencia on November 17th. But there are so many places in between there that will catch the eye, and probably the biggest one and the only new race on this year's schedule, June 16th, the first ever internationally sanctioned motor event in the Republic of Kazakhstan. The Kazakhstan Grand Prix will be held. They tried to have the race in 2023, but I think political factors led to that race being called off. But as of recording this video, that race is still set to happen. Some traditional venues for you. Silverstone hosts the British Grand Prix. That'll be in August. The Red Bull Ring, fittingly, will have the Austrian Grand Prix. Phillip Island, a traditional motorcycle Grand Prix mainstay on the international scene, will host the Australian Grand Prix October 20th. Mugello, a longtime home of the Italian Grand Prix, I'm going to backtrack a little bit, June 2nd, and one of the most coveted races in MotoGP, the Dutch Tourist Trophy that takes place in Assen in Holland. That is on June 30th. So that's a little bit of the schedule highlights. Again, 21 rounds. They'll take place in 15 different countries in addition to Spain hosting 4 races. The Italians will get 2 races, and I am including the San Marino Grand Prix at Misano in that list. So a very broad, very vast schedule. And one last thing before I do move on, a couple of places that Formula One doesn't visit are on this schedule, including Malaysia, which is the second to last race of the season. Formula One, of course, used to race at Sepang. MotoGP continues to race there. The Thai Grand Prix is a MotoGP mainstay. The track's used in various other forms, but MotoGP is their biggest ticket. Indonesia in September, another MotoGP mainstay, while it hasn't quite got Formula One, but Indonesia has definitely embraced it. And another country that has embraced MotoGP is the Indian Grand Prix. This is their second time heading to India, and this is the former home of the Indian F1 Grand Prix, the Greater Noida circuit just outside of Bude. So again, I know I kind of did go a little bit, but as you saw on the screen, this is a very, very diverse schedule of 21 races, and we kick it off this weekend, and just like Formula One, we will go to November. So, schedule aside, let's talk about manufacturers a little bit. So we have 5 manufacturers that will take part in the 2024 MotoGP World Championship. Each one has a factory team, and then you have what are called satellite or privateer teams. Both terms are used pretty loosely with this. But let's start with the reigning manufacturer champions, Ducati. Ducati has a huge stable of 4 teams in their arsenal this year. You have the Ducati Lenovo factory team. You have and then you have 3 Italian satellite privateer teams: Pramac, Gresini, and VR46 Racing. And yes, that is the team owned by the doctor himself, Valentino Rossi. Even though he has retired from the sport, he is still very involved with it, as he is a team that runs year-old Ducatis, but even the year-old machinery in MotoGP is still some pretty wicked and pretty speedy stuff if you ever get to watch the series play out. Next up, we'll stay in Italy and we'll go to Aprilia. Aprilia has 2 teams, and here is a NASCAR connection for you. In addition to Aprilia Racing, Aprilia's satellite team will be none other than Trackhouse. Yes, Justin Marks and Pitbull's Trackhouse team will run 2 Aprilia bikes in the MotoGP Championship this season. First time the house is dipping their toe in the 2-wheel world. So a very exciting time for that team, and looking forward to see what the house can do on 2 wheels as well. Going to Japan, 2 big mainstays of MotoGP, and when I say mainstays, these guys have been here for decades, and that is of course Honda and Yamaha. Honda has the Repsol Honda factory team, And then you also have the Indonesian-based Team LCR. They're essentially a satellite team. They run same year stuff as the factory, sometimes the year old stuff, but at times they will get the current up-to-date bikes if resources allow. Big contrast from Yamaha though. Yamaha, they did have a privateer satellite team in addition to a factory team. Not the case this year. They only have just the Monster Energy Yamaha factory team racing for them this season. So only 2 bikes for Yamaha, Aprilia and Honda, for 4 bikes apiece for them. Ducati has 8 bikes, considering that each team can only run a max 2. And that brings us to our final manufacturer that will be running this season, and that is KTM. And you might as well call them Red Bull KTM, because with the Austrian KTM motorcycle brand, Red Bull has branding all over the Austrian bikes, and that goes for both their satellite team, French-based Tech 3, which has been a long-time participant in the MotoGP Championship, but also, of course, for the KTM factory team. So like I said, it's known as, you have KTM, but you might as well call them Red Bull KTM, because all 4 of the KTM bikes have Red Bull backing on them. So, to round it out, you have Ducati, Aprilia, Honda, KTM, and Yamaha. Those are your five manufacturers competing in MotoGP this season, and based off of recent success, you're going to be very hard pressed to bet against Ducati being dethroned, as they have everything going their way as we look forward to this new season. Last but not least, I want to touch a little bit of riders to watch, and I'm going to put them into 2 categories. The first category I have for you tonight is the established guys who've lost a step. These guys are some big names. However, they're still around, but they haven't had as much success recently. The biggest name in this group has to be Marc Marquez. He's won 9 total championships in MotoGP, 7 at the top level. And I will pause for a second and give you this little nugget. There are 3 levels of MotoGP racing in addition to MotoGP, which is the top class. They also have a 2nd and 3rd tier that run at every race, and they're simply known as Moto 2 and Moto 3. If you are very familiar with Formula 1 and their feeder series ladder, essentially think of it that way. The Moto 2 and Moto 3, the lower down you go, the smaller the bike, the lesser the horsepower, so on and so forth, all the way up until you get to the big class. So I just wanted to make sure we had that squared away. So back to Marquez, 9 total MotoGP championships, 7 premier titles. However, Marc hasn't been the same since 2020. Right out of the COVID lockdown, Marc had a massive accident in the opening race in Spain that year. He missed a lot of the season, and to be honest, that literally was the moment things have shifted for Marc. He has won a couple of races since. However, he has just not been that all earth-shattering dominator that he was in the 2010s. So, and oh, by the way, Marc has left Honda, which has been his team and his home in MotoGP for the better part of a decade plus, and now he's taking a seat alongside none other than his brother Alex. Not the first time those two have raced together in the sport, but the Marquez brothers are heading to the Gresini racing team, and they will ride the team's 2-year-old Ducati chassis. So Mark could be somebody to look out for. Again, has had that pass forward, but still sneaky good. I want to talk about the guy who went on to win that first world championship of the post-Marquez domination era, and his name is Juan Mir. He, like Mark, is from Spain as well. He won that 2020 world championship with Suzuki. Suzuki has since left, and Juan has had to find himself a new home, and he actually has found himself alongside Mark last year at Repsol Honda, the Honda factory team. But last year he took a year to find his footing. They didn't quite get everything up to par, and Honda went winless last year. But when you're a world champion, you cannot be underestimated. So I definitely think Juan has something up his sleeve and can still spur a win. I can also say the same for the man they call El Diablo. His name is Fabio Quartararo. He is a rider from France. He has been the main man at Monster Energy Yamaha essentially since Valentino Rossi and Jorge Lorenzo, two big names in the sport of MotoGP, since they left the sport. And Fabio went on to win the world title in 2021, and he was giving a lot of challenge in 2022, but 2023 seemed to be a little bit of a falling off a cliff for Fabio. Didn't make his way back to the top step. Still had podiums, but the result that he was essentially looking for did not come. El Diablo has not lost any of his speed, but you definitely have to think that he's looking for more in 2024. And with the MotoGP field being as competitive and as parodied as it probably has been in a long time, don't be surprised if Fabio finds his way back to the top step. I can also say the same for the duo that rides the factory KTM bikes, a pair of former winners who the last couple of seasons have kind of slipped. And may have had to test their mojo, and that is South Africa's Brad Binder and Australia's Jack Miller. Miller flipped over to KTM in 2023 after a stint over at Ducati that yielded some great results, however fell short of his ultimate goals. He came to KTM hoping to be a little bit more of a starring role, but last season struggled. Only one podium finish for the Aussie, and definitely this year he will be looking for more results. His teammate, though, showed a lot more promise. Bender had 5 podiums in 2023. However, he's still looking for his first win since 2021. He's gone winless that means winless the last 2 seasons. However, Bender has always had this knack and ability to show that he always has had speed. So I'm very interested to see what the Red Bull KTM factory duo has in store for us this year, because that team has a lot of potential, and I'm pretty sure KTM and Red Bull are not just pouring money in just to fill the numbers. They gave Miller the contract. They have helped their faith in Bender, because Bender has proven himself to win before. Safe to say, I think we have not seen the best out of Red Bull KTM yet, and I think these two riders will make sure they take good note of that for this upcoming season. So that concludes my list of the guys who have had success but have slipped a little bit. Now let's talk about the guys who are in the mood of what have you done for me lately, and the answer is a lot. I will start with last year's runner-up, Spain's Jorge Martin. He rides for the Pramac team. they, like the factory team, get the newest equipment, and Martin showed out last season. Literally took the title down to the final race. Unfortunately, mechanical issues and a fall eventually ended Jorge's run for glory. But you gotta think, after coming so close last season, there is a drive from Jorge and from that Pramac team to take on the factory squad and give them another run for their money in 2024. Another guy who I've been studying and can be a big contender after a breakthrough year in 2023 is the guy who finished behind Jorge in the points, and his name is Mario Bezzecchi of Italy. He finished third last season. He scored 3 wins on the tour, and with that kind of a build-up, I can only imagine he will be hungry and ready to build on that in 2024. Bezzecchi is still a very talented, prominent, rising young star in the premier class, and just like most everybody in this year's field, they've had to climb up through the ladder of Moto 3 to Moto 2 and now into MotoGP. So Bezzecchi having a breakout season in 23 looks to do a whole lot more in 2024. But with that being said, and I saved him for last, as much as you've done for me lately and as much as you're looking for a comeback of sorts, you still have to dethrone the king. And the king of MotoGP at the moment is Francesco Bagnaia, better known in the MotoGP world as Pecca. He is the 2-time reigning MotoGP world champion. He rides for the Ducati factory team, Italian rider, Italian bike. I mean, how can you not? But Pecca had to fight off Fabio Quartararo in 22. In 22, Pecca kind of sailed down the stretch when Quartararo started hitting troubles, and then in 23, he had to hold off Martin in a pretty nail-biting championship decider. While he has shown he has cracks in the dam, his resolve is second to none, especially after claiming that first world title in 22. And essentially, the credit was there. Essentially, once you've done it once, the confidence was there. And in 23, when he was in that close championship battle, he was very ready to show everybody, hey, you got to take the title from me. And try as hard as Jorge Martin was, and yes, it was out of his circumstances, Pecca still reigns supreme. And it looks to be more of the same in 2024. And like I said, until he has been beaten, he is going to be the favorite. And if you are a motorcycle fan and if you love MotoGP, you will be very hard pressed to bet against Pecca Bagnaia. So with that being said, that's a little bit of my MotoGP rundown. That is your schedule, your manufacturers, the teams, and the riders to watch in 2024. Alright, got a couple of other things I want to touch upon before we leave you for this week. Daytona Bike Week is off and running, and it kicked off Saturday night with the biggest event on the Monster Energy Supercross calendar, and that is Daytona Supercross, and that is the calendar's oldest event. Daytona Supercross has been going since 1971, literally before Supercross became Supercross. Supercross bikes on the infield of the World Center of Racing just is panache. So let's start with round 3 of the 250 East Championship, and finally the cards fell right for France's Tom Vial. He rides for KTM. He's a 2-time world motocross champion from Europe. Came over to run Supercross stateside this season, and he's finally broke through with his first win of the season. beating out the Kawasaki duo of Cameron McAdoo and Seth Hamaker to round out the podium. And McAdoo is right in the thick of the fight. Despite an off night for Britain's Max Anstey, he still leads the points by a solitary point, with a tie now, Cameron McAdoo and Pierce Brown right there at 51. So 3 races in, this 250 East fight continues to get very interesting. With that being said, let's jump from the 250 to the 450s. And my goodness, did it look like it was going to be tragic from the beginning. Literally, Jet Lawrence's Honda team almost cost him this race. They left the tire warmer on the back tire. They barely got the warmer off just in time for the gate drop. And once the gate dropped, you would not have known that there was any pre-race drama to be had. Chase Sexton, the series champion, took the whole shot out of the gate with a chasing Eli Tomac, but Jet Lawrence did what Jet Lawrence does, and he just powered his way past Tomac, past Sexton, and just rode off into the distance. Lead getting as big as 12 seconds at one point. It did get down to 5, but even then, no hope for Tomac, no hope for Sexton. Chase Lawrence takes Daytona Supercross, his series-leading 3rd win of the season. And not only was it a series-leading 3rd win, but pivotally, Lawrence extends his championship lead over Cooper Webb to 10 points. Sexton's 3rd place, a much welcome podium after a little bit of a dry spell, puts him up to 3rd in the championship. From Daytona, the AMA Monster Energy Supercross, 250 East and 450 head to Alabama to make their first ever visit to the city of Birmingham. They will race at Protective Stadium on the campus of the University of Alabama at Birmingham. That is this Saturday, March 9th. So, Birmingham fans, it's been a long time coming. I hope you guys go out and pack those stands. I mentioned Daytona Bike Week kicking off last weekend with Daytona Supercross. It's a huge week, 2 wheels all over the beach in Daytona. However, there is one crown piece event that is still left to go, and that is the 82nd renewal of the Daytona 200. The Daytona 500 is the Great American Race. Well, let me introduce you to the Great American Motorcycle Race. Literally the oldest motorcycle race in America, and for the longest of time was known as one of the most prestigious races in the world. The Daytona 200 first ran in 1937 and has been ran every year with the exception of 6. There was 5 years. The race was canceled for World War II from 42 to 46, and then it was ran every year from 1947 to 2019 and was on the verge of being ran in 2020 until, COVID happened. But funny to note that, like NASCAR, the Daytona 200 also started on the beach. However, it started a whole decade earlier, as you may have noticed, and it actually lasted on the beach longer. When NASCAR went to the Speedway in 1959, the bikes actually stayed on the NASCAR configured road course on the beach for an additional 2 years. Quick little fun fact, the original beach layout was only 3 miles. They changed it to the 4 mile. They changed it and they ran the 4 mile NASCAR layout in 48 and ran it all the way up to 1960. In 1961, the race moved to Daytona International Speedway, where it has been held ever since. And while the race has gone through its lulls, the race was part of the very prestigious Formula One Superbike World Championship in the 70s and 80s, as the track took its toll on the faster bikes. The race did lose a little bit of its prestige as the bikes went, as the organizing bodies went to lesser power classes to make sure bikes lasted for their safety and everything else. But I think we're back to a pretty good place with the Daytona 200. Moto America, which is sanctioned, which is backed by the American Motorcyclists Association, the AMA, and the International Motorcycle Federation, the FIM, two of the premier organizing and sanctioning committees. Moto America 2 years ago took over sanction of the Daytona 200, and essentially this is the format of the race nowadays. Moto America took over in 2022. It is a non-points race. It uses their Super Sport class regulations. Super Sport is the third tier in Moto America. However, it's a non-points race, and there's reason behind that. It allows two things. It allows for one, the top pro riders to be able to come and race the event. If it was a points race in Super Sport, they wouldn't be able to. And then the non-points also allows for open tire competition. So you have the Dunlops, the Hondas, the Michelins of the world are able to take part in this race. And they have quite the entry list. 68 riders are set to take on the Daytona 200 this year. And I think that just speaks to how big Moto America has helped to drum up the race support. A little bit more specifics on the race. It is on a slightly modified version of the famed Daytona infield and oval combined road course. They do trim the bike turns, trim off a little bit of the original road course, so it's literally right on 3.5 miles. 200 miles, 57 laps make up the race distance, and the race will take place this Saturday, March 9th. They will take off from the grid a little after 1 p.m. Anybody in motorcycles has won this race. Like I said, it used to have the grandiose world prestige, but make no mistake, this is still a very prominent race to win. And it's probably one of the greatest races, if for no other reason, just because of the challenge. Multiple pit stops, and it feels like a little bit of a solo endurance race, because most races in motorcycle racing, they only go about 60-70 miles at best. The Daytona 200 is triple the length of a normal motorcycle race that the top riders run nowadays. So that challenge and everything else that comes along with it just makes this race still have some valuable and importance within the motorcycle community. So there you have it, the Daytona 200. And with that being said, that's all I have for this Two Wheel Tuesday episode of the Scrutineering Room. How do you guys feel about motorcycle racing? What do you guys think about the information I gave you guys tonight? Leave a comment, like, subscribe, follow. If you subscribe to me here on YouTube, you will get first information when we get around to our new venture, which will be taking off a little later this year. I can't give you specifics because I still have a few details to work out, but I won't go into that too much. Again, feel free. Critiques are open, comments open, leave a message. But with that being said, share this video, especially to those two-wheel gearheads in your life. Let them have them take a look at this, see how I did. Hey, if they like it, then I might be doing something right. But with that being said, I'm David. Thank you, family, for coming inside the Scrutineering Room for another episode. I will see you next time, and until then, keep a smile on your face, folks. You look much better when you have one. So long, everyone.